Greetings, Boogie fans! Michael here, and over the course of the main series Pokemon games, several Pokemon's colors have changed. And I'm not just talking about Kecleon doing its thing. In Gen 2, Charizard's shiny was purple before being changed to black in Gen 3. And as recently as the Crown Tundra, Combusken's shiny was changed to become more noticeable, which was actually it reverting to how it looked in Gen 3. But it's not just shiny colorations that have changed. The regular colorations of a lot of Pokemon have fluctuated quite a bit. Some of them look different in one game than all of the others, or some went through a gradual change, or some went through a very dramatic change. Today, I'm going to be covering 66 examples of Pokemon having their color changed. Their regular color, not their shiny coloration. I should note up front that I will not be looking at any of the Gen 1 sprites because they were originally just black and white, and then when colorized, it's just one Pokemon tinted entirely one color, so it's not really normal. I will also not be looking at the Gen 2 sprites, for the most part. They do have more color options, but overall we're still pretty limited in their color palette. So I'm not gonna be looking at Grimer looking a lot darker in Gen 2 than in other generations because they just had access to fewer shades back then. Although any changes within Gen 2 or any changes that are super dramatic, those I'll cover. So don't forget to subscribe to my channel and tap that bell for notifications, please. And let's dive in to 66 examples of official Pokemon color changes. For Bulbasaur, it seems like they have trouble deciding if they want him to be blue or bluish green. Most of its sprites and the home art is blue, but the 3D model tints it much more green. Ivysaur has experienced this too. Look at how different it looks between the Sinnoh games and the Gen 4 Johto games. There are shiny versions of Pokemon that look less different. Squirtle is another starter that can't seem to get its coloration straight. It was firmly blue in Gen 2, a pale greenish blue in Gen 3 Hoenn, a pale blue in Gen 3 Kanto, pale greenish blue again in Gen 4, then made more blue in Gen 5. Look at the Diamond and Pearl sprite versus the Black and White sprite. It's the same sprite, but they made it more blue in Gen 5. Then the 3D models make it firmly blue. I'm mainly talking about sprites and in-game models for this video, but I gotta show you some of Squirtle's official art because it's ridiculous. Here is its official red and green art, then red and blue art, original series anime art, and modern day Sugimori art that's been around since Gen 3. This simple turtle has more color options than a Crayola box. Arbok's face patterns have been quite different across the generations. I suppose this isn't technically a color change, it's a color pattern change. It was a lighter purple in Gen 3 though, but that's not as prominent as the face changes. Nidoran female is a periwinkle, almost gray color in every generation except Gen 3, where it's a much lighter pale blue. The lighter color corresponds better to its original red and green and red and blue art, but the darker, more consistent color better fits with its anime and modern art. To this day, this trips me up, since my first generation and the first time I ever played through Kanto was Gen 3. So in my head, I think of Nidoran female as that lighter blue color. And then I see it as the darker color and get confused, despite the fact that that color is more common. Quick thing before I move on to the next entry though, the Hail Yeah shirt that I am selling is still available, but only for like less than 2 more days as of posting this video. So if you want one, you gotta get it now, and you totally should, it's a great shirt. The link is in the description below. Hurry, vamonos, let's go. Come on, people. Vileplume's Gen 3 Hoenn sprites are much lighter than its sprites elsewhere, even in the same generation compared to Fire Red and Leaf Green. In most games, it is a dark blue with a pinkish red flower. But in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, the flower is so light, it almost looks orange. Parasect sprites in Gens 3 through 5 have its mushroom as a bright red. Then in Gen 6, they killed the saturation so much that it became an extremely pale pink. It should be noted that a big problem with the Gen 6 and Gen 7 3D models is that the colors get super washed out, and it makes a lot of Pokemon look substantially worse. I'm not going to cover all examples of that because there's a lot of them. I'm just going to cover some of the most egregious ones, and I think Parasect is one of the worst examples. Although it seems like they're kind of learning from their mistake a bit, Parasect's art in Pokemon Home is nice bright red again. Graveler's sprites in Gen 3 have it looking a lot more colorful than in other generations. I am not a color expert, but it seems like the Gen 3 sprites have more brown and green, whereas the other generation Gravelers are just a flat gray with a slight bit of brown. Unlike Graveler, its evolution Golem had that greenish, brownish, grayish color on its shell for Gens 3 through 5, but then moving to 3D in Gen 6 made its shell much less saturated. Unlike Parasect though, it has stayed at that grayer color, as evidenced by its home art, and home art tends to be far more vibrant and saturated than art elsewhere. Maybe some erosion occurred. Gengar has always been some shade of purple, but that shade has varied wildly. It's also changed its eye color, varying from bright saturated red to so pale that it looks peach. Execute in Heart Gold and Soul Silver is a substantially more purple shade of pink than Execute in Diamond and Pearl, plus most other games. Seadra is one of the few Pokemon whose colors actually got more vibrant in the transition from 2D to 3D, and I thought that was worthy of note. Starmie might be the most egregious example of the 3D model desaturation, going from a deep, beautiful purple in Gen 5 to a pasty, pale purple in Gen 6. It looks a bit better in Sword and Shield, and actually a lot better in Let's Go and in Home. Like Vileplume, Jynx is much more brightly colored in Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald compared to Fire Red and Leaf Green, and all the subsequent games. Electabuzz is also in a similar situation, with its Gen 3 Hoenn sprites weirdly being paler than the sprite of it in another game in the same generation. Gyarados has also had a surprising amount of changes. In Gen 3, it was a desaturated grayish blue. In Gens 4 and 5, it was a saturated cyan. Then in Gen 6, it actually got so dark that it became almost the same color as its forehead crest, which was not the case in previous generations. Vaporeon is consistently a light blue in every generation, except Gen 3, where it's more of a greenish blue. Flareon also looks different in Gen 3 than other generations. Most of the time it's reddish orange with tan fur, but in Gen 3, it's much less red and has bright yellow fur. The Hoenn game sprite is the starkest difference and almost looks shiny. Porygon's colors, both its pink and blue parts, have been pretty inconsistent. At various points, the pink segments have been either pale pink or hot pink, and the blue parts have varied wildly between very blue and a far lighter teal. Ammonite is like Vaporeon, where it looks very blue in every generation except 3, where it looks a lot more greenish. Amistar is in the exact same boat. Gen 3 Snorlax is a mess. Not only does its Hoenn sprite have very different colors from its Kanto sprite, being far more gray compared to the Kanto sprite's green, but its shiny sprites are virtually the same color as the regular sprites in later generations, being a dark bluish green. I suppose when the Pokemon's primary color is a weird and hard to describe color that's a dark green and blue at the same time while also having some gray in it, I understand being confused, but not so confused in Gen 3 that, my God, they look so different from everywhere else. Gen 3 Dratini is a pale purple, while Gens 4 through 5 make it far more blue, then the switch to 3D makes it kind of a periwinkle. Chikorita in Gold and Silver is yellow, but in Crystal they change it to green, which it has remained for all subsequent generations. I know I said I wasn't gonna take Gen 2 sprites into account very much due to the limited color palette, but that doesn't apply if the change is within Gen 2. They had access to the same color palettes. Like Chikorita, Meganium also got a change within Gen 2. its Crystal sprite both darkened its flower and changed the pattern on it, compared to its Gold and Silver sprites. Croconaw got much darker in Crystal compared to the previous Johto games. Sentret was brown in Gen 2, became a light tan in Gen 3 and the Gen 4 Sinnoh games, and then in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, it switched back to being much darker, and it's kept that darker brown color since then. In Gen 3, Noctowl has a brown beak. In every other depiction of it, in all other generations, its beak is the same color as its forehead crest and the area under its eyes, not much darker. Side note, for many years, I thought Noctowl's shiny coloring was the normal coloring because I saw Ash's in the anime, but missed the episode where he caught it and they made a point of saying, oh, this is different. This next one might be the most dramatic color change in the entire main series. For most of Spinarak's appearances, it has been primarily green. In fact, official depictions of its regular coloration are exclusively green, except for in Gold and Silver, where it is purple and indigo. What? They changed it to green in Crystal, but the Gen 2 shiny coloration stayed the same at a color partway between purple and pink. Then in Gen 3, it became firmly green, but the shiny was changed to blue, possibly as a nod to its Gold and Silver coloration. This baffles me to this day. Spinarak has never been depicted as dark purple and indigo anywhere but the original games where it was introduced. This just blows my mind. Like, why didn't it stay that color? Or why didn't they make it green initially? I just don't get what happened. It's such a dramatic change. Togetic was very yellow in Gold and Silver, but then it became its usual whitish gray color in Crystal. Next up, we have another Gen 2 Pokemon whose changes are probably not as dramatic as Spinarak's, but it's been through so many. Bellossom's dress and flowers were pink in Gold and Silver, then red in Crystal, and then the red flowers and green and yellow dress that we're used to for all the subsequent generations. Oddly enough, its original Gold and Silver Sugimori art had red flowers, the green and yellow dress, but a dark blue body, a color combination never seen in the games. The closest to that was its Gen 2 shiny, which had the red flowers and blue body, but not the right color dress. Then the shiny changes to pink flowers, a green and yellow dress, and a darker pink body. Bellossom has been through so many wardrobe changes, my god. Quagsire is one of the few Pokemon with 3 distinct sprites in Gen 4, and every single one of them is a different shade of blue. Wobbuffet is another Pokemon that got a substantial color change between the Johto games. It is far more blue in Crystal than in Gold and Silver. Girafarig's transition to 3D actually made its colors get more saturated, particularly its back half, which went from a pale light brown to a very dark brown. In generations 3 through 5, Pineco is a pretty brightly colored grayish blue. But then the switch to 3D made it not only darker, but also much closer to green as opposed to blue. This transition was also reflected in the official art. Dunsparce in Gold and Silver had dark blue stripes and eye borders, but in Crystal they were changed to the light blue that we know it to have today. Like Quagsire, Gligar had 3 different sprites in Gen 4, and all of them are dramatically different colors. The Diamond and Pearl sprite is closer to the Gen 3 sprites, but the Heart Gold Soul Silver sprite is closer to the brighter pink that it has in later generations. And then, I don't know what the hell is going on in Platinum. They turned it from pink to purple for a single game. Quillfish was blue on top, green on bottom in Gold and Silver, then blue on top, yellow on bottom in Crystal, stayed that way for Gen 3 and for the Gen 4 Sinnoh games, then turned green on top, yellow on bottom in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, then turned green on top, lighter green on bottom in Gen 5, and has been that way ever since. If you put Quillfish's Diamond and Pearl sprite next to its black and white sprite and told me one of them was the shiny form, I would believe you. Scizor is very consistently red, except for in Gen 3 when it was randomly orange. Sneasel has been dark bluish gray with pink feathers in every game, except Gold and Silver, where it was brown with pale blue feathers. I think the Sneasel change is close to the level of Spinarak dramatic. Teddiursa was brown all the way up until Heart Gold and Soul Silver, when it became orange. Ursaring also had a color change at the same time, becoming a much darker brown between Platinum and Heart Gold Soul Silver. Magcargo started out as pink with a brown shell in Gold and Silver, then became reddish orange with a blue shell in Crystal. Also worthy of note, its Gen 2 shiny was blue, but then became its still current purple in Gen 3. Mantine sprites in the Gen 4 Sinnoh games and Gen 5 are much lighter than all of the other games, its back being a pretty light blue compared to its typical navy color. In Gold and Silver, Skarmory's wings were not red like they are in every other game. The vibrancy of Raiko's cape, or whatever it is, got dialed way down in the shift from the Gen 4 Sinnoh games to Heart Gold Soul Silver. Lugia had black eye crests, back fins, and tail spikes in Gen 3, but since Gen 4, all of those have been navy blue. Grovyle's leaves had a bluish tint to them in Gens 3 and 4, but they changed to a darker forest green in Gen 5. Swampert had a similar change at the same point. Prior to Gen 5, its fins were a navy blue, but then they became such a dark gray that they're almost black now. Gen 3 Beautifly was way lighter than other generations, with the darkest parts of its body being a very pale brown as opposed to the dark gray it usually has. Also, side note, I had not seen Beautifly's shiny before making this video, and I must say, I like it. I think it's quite tasteful, especially with the purple. Works well. While the exact shade has varied, for most versions of Masquerain, the bottom crescent portion of its wings are the exact same color as its face. But this was not the case in Gen 3, where its wings were a pale orange compared to a bright red face. In a similar vein, in every generation except 3, Shedinja's face, wings, and arms are a golden brown, while its belly is gray. However, back in Gen 3, it was all one color, and a substantially different one at that. Nosepass nowadays is a dark grayish blue. Gen 3 Nosepass was not only not blue at all, but it was differently shaped too. Gen 3 Delcatty was much lighter than later generations. The purple parts are much closer to pink. The red parts of Plusle's body got a lot darker between Gens 4 and 5. Normally this change wouldn't be dramatic enough for me to note, but I'm mentioning it for Plusle because it made it even harder to tell the difference between its regular and shiny colorations. Minun had a change in the opposite direction. The blue parts of its body became cyan when the 3D transition happened. Sharpedo got much darker between Gens 4 and 5, but then settled on a shade somewhere between those two in the 3D transition. Wailord was a royal blue until Gen 6, when it became cyan. Altaria became much more saturated, moving from Diamond and Pearl to Platinum. I wouldn't have noted this if it was a cross-generational change, but this is in the same frickin' generation and region. Zangoose had purple claws in Gen 3. They're dark gray everywhere else. Barboach had almost the same exact thing happen to it as Altaria. Its blue became far more saturated in the move from Diamond and Pearl to Platinum. Crawdaunt was very orange in Gens 3 and 4, but it became bright red in Gen 5 and has stayed that way ever since. Bagon was a completely different shade of blue in Gen 3 compared to later gens. Salamence was also a different shade of blue in Gen 3, but in addition to that, it had orange wings in both Gens 3 and 4. Its wings are a deep red in literally every other not shiny piece of official art and sprites. Regice was a much dingier color in Gens 3 and 4, but now it's a much brighter blue. This changes the reason why its current day shiny form is so not noticeable. It was noticeable, but then they changed Regice's regular color to be closer to the shiny. And finally, Jirachi's tassels are royal blue in Gen 3, then become teal for all later generations. And that's it, none past Gen 3. I clicked through all of the Gen 4 Pokemon and couldn't find any changes that I thought were noteworthy, and I didn't think it was necessary to go past that because the further you go, the more consistent they get. Don't forget to pick up a Hail Yeah shirt before time runs out. It's less than 48 hours, I think, somewhere around there. So make sure you go pick one up using the link in the description below. And thank you so much for watching. With an extra special thanks to my patrons over on Patreon who are helping support my channel during times when ad rates fluctuate a lot. If you want to help support me in the same way, the link is also in the description below, just like the shirt link. And if you want to check out some of my fun Pokemon content, both here on this channel and on my second channel, you can click the stuff around here. All right, that's all I have for now. So until next time, Pick Fans, gotta catch them all.